Alright, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place on this build, but you know, I got some bodywork drying, so I'm going to look at the rear brakes on this bike. I don't know how I'm going to break this video up, but this is a 2006 Kawasaki Ninja 650R. And when I got the bike, there was no brake fluid in the rear master cylinder, or very little. And the brake pads are shot. So I've got new pads for it, but what I want to do first is I want to bleed these brakes, make sure that it's working properly and everything. And then after I'm done messing with all that brake fluid and stuff, I'll take these off, replace the rear pads. These rotors are in pretty bad shape, but maybe once they run a little bit and get cleaned up, they'll be okay. I don't really use the rear brakes a lot, but like to have some stopping power in case it's an emergency. Want the rear brakes working properly. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to just bleed these, get all the old fluid that may be left in the line out, and get some new fluid pumping through it. Okay, so I'm going to pump the rear brakes, and actually there's no air coming out of it, so there must have been a little bit of brake fluid left in the system. And the brake fluid's not too dirty, so I pumped it through a couple times before I turned the camera on, and it looks pretty good. So this seems to be working. I don't see any leaks anywhere. Pedal feels good. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and take these pads off. I'm gonna spray some brake cleaner on there and get that brake fluid that's running off. But I'm gonna go ahead and remove these pads. Alright, to remove the rear brake caliper, you just remove the two screws down here at the lower section. You can see they're out. Then you just lift the caliper off, and as you can see, there is absolutely no pads left on this thing. I mean, come on, people. It's not that hard to do rear brakes and take care of something. So, like I said, this brake rotor is pretty bad, but we're going to go with it. I'm going to try to clean it up a little bit with some sandpaper and see if we can get some of the rust off of it and see if we can make it look a little bit better. I know most of that will probably come off as soon as you get on the brakes a few times, but I'm going to try to clean it up some now. Alright, to take these pads off, you got a little pin down there you have to pull out, and you can pull that pin out and or pull that little clip out that you can see right down in there. So pull that little clip out and that center pin should come out, and then you can remove the pads. Here's the new pads, what they look like. So let me pull that pin and get those pads off. Alright, so I just compressed the caliper. I used a socket. This was a 1 1/8 socket that fit on there perfect, and then a big C-clamp, and compressed it down. I also took the lid off the master cylinder and made sure that it didn't overflow while I was doing it. Cleaned up the spring in there, and this slide, I'm just going to put just a dab of grease on these springs down here, just so they'll slide back and forth well. I'm using this brake caliper grease that I have. Didn't even know I had it and just ran across it, so I figured I'd use it. So I'm just going to put some on here, just a very thin layer, just to help it slide back and forth and not squeal. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, so I hit my pin on the wire wheel just to clean that up. Let me see if I can set the camera up here. And we'll slap all these together. So you just line your pads up there and put this pin through the hole, and it should go through both of the pads, and then you'll just have to spin it around until you can get the little clip, which is this little clip. I hope you can see it. And then you just line it up in the hole and you put it down. Your brake pads should be done. So you just have to wiggle them around. Might have to push down on the little spring inside to get it to get the pad to come over top of those springs on both sides. And there you go. That's how easy these pads are. So now we're going to put them back on the bike. And I don't know if it's in view, but we're going to just lift them up and put it back down over the caliper. And then we'll just line the two bolts up that hold those on. And then we'll test out the brakes. Okay, one thing that's very important when you do this is to make sure you pump the rear brakes a few times before you start to move, because that caliper is compressed and it's not going to touch the rotor. You can see this one's working now, and the brake pedal feels good. So we should have rear brakes again and not be going metal on metal. So that's all there is to the rear brake pads. So this job is done, at least that part of it. I am going to have to take all this back off again when I later on when I go to paint this rear part of the frame, because this is a different color than the rest of the bike, so I'm probably going to repaint this, but that'll be down the road a ways, so I'm not really worried about it. But I wanted to get those brakes, go ahead and make sure we didn't have any brake leaks anywhere, and to just flush out the brake fluid, get new brake fluid in it. So yeah, so the rears are done. We'll do the front another time, but so now we're going to move on, see if the